Write 7 over 100 as a decimal. So there's two ways of doing this question. You can either put 7 divided by 100 into your calculator and then press the change button, or you can work out 7 divided by 100 in your head. We can rewrite it as 7 divided by 10 divided by 10. And 7 divided by 10 is 0.7, and then 0.7 divided by 10 gives us 0.07. Either method will work and both will get you 1 mark. Write down a multiple of 6 that is between 40 and 50. So we can start off this question by listing the 6 times tables until we reach a number which is between 40 and 50. So 1 multiplied by 6 is 6, 2 multiplied by 6 is 12, 3 multiplied by 6 is 18, 4 multiplied by 6 is 24, 5 multiplied by 6 is 30, 6 multiplied by 6 is 36, 7 multiplied by 6 is 42, 8 multiplied by 6 is 48, and 9 multiplied by 6 is 54. So from this list we can see that there are two numbers that are between 40 and 50, and this is 42 and 48. So there are two possible answers for this question, and that's 42 or 48. Simplify 3f multiplied by 5g. So 3f multiplied by 5g is the same as writing 3 multiplied by f multiplied by 5 multiplied by g. Now what we can do is we can multiply together these numbers. So 3 multiplied by 5 gives us 15, and then multiplied by our f and then g. And then we can rewrite this as 15fg. And this question is worth 1 mark, and we get this for the answer. Simplify t multiplied by t. So if we let t be equal to 3, then this means that t multiplied by t is 3 multiplied by 3. Now when we're multiplying two numbers which are the same, this is the same as squaring it. So this means 3 multiplied by 3 is equal to 3 squared. Now the same principles apply to algebra. So this means that t multiplied by t is equal to t squared. And this question is worth 1 mark for the correct answer. Simplify 2n plus 6n divided by 2. So in order to simplify this expression, we're going to want to simplify down the numerator first, which is the 2n plus 6n. Now 2n plus 6n is equal to 8n. So what this means is 2n plus 6n divided by 2 is equal to 8n divided by 2. And now 8 divided by 2 is equal to 4, which means 8n divided by 2 is equal to 4n. Ken buys some fruit. He buys apples, bananas, peaches and oranges. Ken buys 4 apples weighing 125 grams each, 2 bananas weighing 170 grams each, 3 peaches weighing 135 grams each. Each orange has a weight of 90 grams. The fruit has a total weight of 1.785 kilograms. Work out how many oranges Ken buys. So the first thing we can note down for this question is the fruit has a total weight of 1.785 kilograms. Now 1.785 kilograms is equal to 1,785 grams. Now because the rest of the weights are in grams, this will make the question easier to work out. So we can let x be the number of oranges bought, and we can use this to add up the total weight of the fruit. So 4 multiplied by 125 grams for the apples plus 2 multiplied by 170 grams for the bananas, plus 3 multiplied by 135 grams for the peaches, and then plus 90 multiplied by x, which is our number of oranges, will be equal to 1,785 grams. Now we can use our calculator to simplify down this expression. So 4 multiplied by 125 is 500 grams. 2 multiplied by 170 is 340 grams. 3 multiplied by 135 is 405. And then we have our plus 90x, which is equal to 1,785. Now 500 plus 340 plus 405 is 1,245. Now the next thing we can do is minus 1,245 from both sides of this equation. And this tells us that the total mass of the oranges is 540 grams. And now the final thing we need to do to make x the subject and therefore work out the number of oranges bought is divide both sides by 90. And this tells us that x is equal to 6. And therefore Ken bought 6 oranges. Now this question is worth 3 marks. We'll get our first mark for working out the total weight of one type of fruit, our second mark for working out the total weight of the oranges, and then our third mark for the correct answer. Jane wants to buy 15 tomatoes. She asks for 1 kilogram of tomatoes at a shop. Jane assumes that each tomato has a weight of 75 grams. If Jane's assumption is correct, will she get 15 tomatoes? You must show how you get your answer. So the first thing we need to note for this question is that 1 kilogram is equal to 1,000 grams. Now if Jane is correct, then if we do 1,000 divided by 75, we should get an answer of 15. So we can put into our calculator 1,000 divided by 75, and this should give us an answer of 13 1/3. Now 13 1/3 is not equal to 15, so therefore no, Jane will not get 15 tomatoes. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for doing 1,000 divided by 75 to work out the number of tomatoes she will get. And we'll get our second mark for writing this conclusion with the supported evidence. If Jane's assumption is not correct, could she get 15 tomatoes? Justify your answer. So Jane has assumed that each tomato will be 75 grams. However, if each tomato weighs less than 75 grams, for example, say 50 grams, then Jane will be able to get more than 15 tomatoes. So yes, Jane is correct, because if each tomato weighed less than 75 grams, then Jane could get 15 tomatoes. "60 students were asked how they get to school. The table shows the results. What fraction of the 60 students did not walk to school?" So in order to work out the answer, we'll need to work out the number of students which travelled by bus, car and bicycle. So the number of students which did not walk to school is 15, add 12, add 6. And this is 33. However, we want to work out what fraction of the 60 students did not walk to school. And this means that 33 out of 60 students did not walk to school. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for this calculation to work out the number of students who didn't walk to school, and the second mark for the correct answer. Complete the pie chart for the information in the table. So what we can see for this question is that the section for the number of students which travelled to school by bus has already been filled in on the pie chart. So we can ignore this bus column here. So in order to complete this pie chart, we're going to need to work out the number of degrees we'll need to add on for each student. Now, one way to think about this is there's 360 degrees in a circle, and we need to split this equally between 60 students. So the calculation we can do is 360 divided by 60, and this gives us an answer of 6 degrees. So what this means is that each student is represented by 6 degrees on this pie chart. And we can check this with the bust section of the pie chart. This right angle here means that this section is 90 degrees, and 6 multiplied by 15 is equal to 90. So we're going to need to do the same calculation for walk, car and bicycle. So if we start off with walk, we can use our calculator to work out 27 multiplied by 6. And 27 multiplied by 6 is equal to 162 degrees. Next we can move on to car. So 12 multiplied by 6, we can again use our calculator to work out, and this is equal to 72 degrees. Finally, bicycle. Now 6 multiplied by 6 is equal to 36 degrees. Now the final thing we need to do is fill this information into our pie chart here. And to do this, we're going to need to use a protractor. Now what we'll do is we'll place the protractor on this line here and then draw a line at 162 degrees. And we can write in that this section is the number of students which walked to school. Now we can use the same process for the number of students which took a car to school. However, we'll place the protractor on this line here, which we've drawn in. And this time we'll measure 72 degrees. And we can again fill this in with the number of students which took a car to school. Now if we filled in these angles correctly, then if we measure this final sector here, it should measure 36 degrees. And we can fill this in with the number of students which take a bicycle to school. Now this question is worth 4 marks. We'll get our first mark for working out one of the angles correctly, our second and third mark for filling in the 3 angles correctly on the pie chart, and our 4th mark for adding the correct labels. Annie and Lily share some money in the ratio 4:3. What fraction of the money does Lily get? So the ratio of money which Annie will get compared to Lily will be 4:3. So what this means is that Annie will get 4 parts of the money and Lily will get 3. And if this is the case, then the number of parts of money in total that there will be 4 plus 3, which is equal to 7. So if Lily will be getting 3 parts out of a total of 7 parts, then we can rewrite this as the fraction 3/7. And this question is worth 1 mark, and this is for the correct answer. Rosie and Dan share some sweets. Dan gets 1/4 of the sweets. Write down the ratio of the number of sweets Rosie gets to the number of sweets Dan gets. So if Dan gets 1/4 of the sweets, then what this means is that Rosie will get 3/4 of the sweets. Now we want the ratio of the sweets that Rosie gets to the ratio that Dan gets. And we can rewrite these numbers as a ratio. However, when using ratio, we want to be working in whole numbers. So in order to get both 3/4 and 1/4 into whole numbers, we can multiply both sides of this ratio by 4. And this gives us an answer of 3:1. Now this question's worth 1 mark, and this is for the correct answer. Steve says there are more prime numbers between 20 and 30 than there are between 10 and 20. Is Steve right? You must show how you get your answer. So the first thing to note for this question is that a prime number is a number which is only divisible by itself and 1. So in order to work out whether there are more prime numbers between 20 and 30 than between 10 and 20, we're going to want to list all the prime numbers between 10 and 20 and then between 20 and 30. So if we start off with 10 to 20, there are 4 prime numbers between 10 and 20, and these are 11, 13, 17 and then 19. And next we can move on to numbers between 20 and 30. Now between 20 and 30, there are only 2 prime numbers, and these are 23 and then 29. So as you can see here, we've proven that Steve is wrong because we've shown that there are 4 prime numbers between 10 and 20, but only 2 between 20 and 30. So in order to complete this question, we need to write a final summary statement. So we can write something along the lines of, no, Steve is not correct because there are 4 prime numbers between 10 and 20, but only 2 between 20 and 30. Now this question is worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for writing all the prime numbers between 10 and 30, and we'll get our second mark for writing this final summary statement with the supporting evidence. Chrissy drew this graph to show the percentage of buses that got to a bus stop on time for 6 months. Write down one thing that is wrong with the graph. So what we can see from this graph is that the vertical scale factor, which is the percentage of buses which were on time, goes 0, 10, 20 and then 40. So there should be a 30 between this 20 and 40. So one thing that is wrong with the graph is that the vertical scale factor is not linear. Describe the trend in the percentage of buses that got to the bus stop on time. So what we can see from this graph is the percentage of buses arriving on time is increasing throughout the months. So we can write that the trend in the percentage of buses that got to the bus stop on time is positive. Here is a map of an island. A straight road joins the 2 villages Backley and Crempford. Work out the real distance between the 2 villages. So what we need to do is we need to use our ruler to measure this line from Backley to Crempford. And this should measure 5.5 centimetres. Now in this question we've been given a scale which we can use. So it tells us that 1 centimetre represents 0.5 kilometres. However, we've measured a line of 5.5 centimetres. Now, in order to get from 1 centimetre to 5.5 centimetres, we need to multiply 1 by 5.5. So in order to work out the actual distance between the 2 villages, we're going to also want to multiply 0.5 by 5.5. And we can use our calculator, and this should give us an answer of 2.75 kilometres. And this is our final answer. Now this question is worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for multiplying 0.5 by 5.5, and we'll get our second mark for the correct answer. Find the bearing of Crempford from Backley. So the bearing of Crempford from Backley is this angle here. However, when using bearings, we'll always measure from the north line, which is being given to us on this diagram. So the angle we're going to want to measure is this angle here. And using a protractor, we should get an angle of around 130 degrees. And this question is worth 1 mark, and this is for the correct answer. The diagram shows 2 shapes drawn on a centimetre grid. Find the area of shape P. So shape P is this triangle on the left here. And there's two ways of doing this question. You can either count up the squares, however this may get difficult because we have quarter and half squares here, or you can use the formula for the area of a triangle. So the formula for the area of a triangle is a half base times height. So the base of this triangle will be this line here, and this is 4 squares long. And the height of the triangle is this line here, and this is 6 squares long. So if we substitute these numbers into this equation, a half multiplied by 4 multiplied by 6 will give us an answer of 12. Now the most important thing to remember for this question is that our units haven't been given in the answer. So because this grid is a centimetre grid, then what this means is the answer will be given in centimetres squared. And this question is worth 2 marks, 1 mark for the correct area and 1 mark for the correct units. Write down the mathematical name of quadrilateral Q. So the properties of this shape is that these 2 lengths are equal and then these 2 lengths are equal. Now both equal lengths are adjacent to each other rather than opposite to each other like they would be in a rectangle, and the shape which fits these properties is a kite. So the mathematical name of quadrilateral Q is a kite. The table shows a cricket club's income in 2016 from a fete, a quiz and membership fees. Express as a ratio the income from the fete to the income from the quiz to the income from membership fees. Give your ratio in its simplest form. So we've been given this table with the costs earned from each of the 3 events. And the thing we're going to want to start off with is working out the income from each of these events individually. So if we start off with the fete, the income from the fete was £250. Next, the quiz. We can see that there's 2 sources of income from the quiz. We have entry fees, in which 13 were bought at £5 each, and then refreshments, which were £35. So in order to work this out, we can do 13 multiplied by 5 plus 35, and we can put this into our calculator, and we should get an answer of £100. And finally, membership fees. 25 membership fees were bought at £20 each. So we can do the calculation 25 multiplied by 20. And this will give us an answer of £500. So we've worked out the income from each of these 3 events. However, now we need to express it as a ratio. So we want to express it in the order of the income from the fete to the income from the quiz to the income from the membership fees. So the next thing we can do is we can substitute the incomes of each of these events into a ratio which is in the same form as this one here. So the income from the fete was £250, the income from the quiz was £100, and then the income from the membership fees was £500. Now these incomes have now been expressed as a ratio, however we want the ratio in its simplest form. So in order to do this, we're going to want to divide each of these 3 numbers by a common factor. So what we can do is divide these 3 numbers by 50. So 250 divided by 50 will give us 5. 100 divided by 50 will give us 2. And then 500 divided by 50 will give us 10. And we know this is in its simplest form because 5 is a prime number. Now this question is worth 3 marks. We'll get our first mark for working out the income from the 3 events, the second mark for putting these values into a ratio form, and the third mark for the correct answer. 200 people live in a village. 23 people do not have a garden. 10 males do not have a garden. 95 people are male. Use this information to complete the frequency tree. So one of the things we'll need to know when completing a frequency tree is if there are 200 people living in this village, then each of these columns will add up to 200. So now we can start by filling in the information we've been given in the question. So 23 people do not have a garden. So we can fill in this circle here with 23. The next piece of information we've been given in the question is that 10 males do not have a garden. So we'll look at the side of the people who do not have a garden and then those who are male, and we can fill this in as 10. Now the final bit of information we've been told in the question is that 95 people are male. So if the number of people who do not have a garden and are male is 10, and there are 95 males in total, then what this means is that the number of males who do have a garden, which will be this circle here, will be 85. And we can see if we add 85 and 10 together, we'll get an answer of 95. So we can now fill in the rest of this frequency tree from the information which we've filled in. So we can first start off with the number of females who do not have a garden. So if there are 23 people in total who do not have a garden, and 10 of them are male, then what this means is that 13 of them will be female. So next we know that 200 people live in this village. 23 of them do not have a garden. Therefore, 200 minus 23 of them will have a garden, which gives us 177 people. And now in order to fill in this final circle, the number of females which do have a garden, we know that 177 people do have a garden and 85 of them are male. So therefore, if we do 177 minus 85, this gives us an answer of 92. So therefore we know that 92 females do have a garden. Now this question is worth 3 marks, and we'll get all 3 marks for filling in this frequency tree correctly. One of the people who does not have a garden is chosen at random. Write down the probability that this person is female. So from the frequency tree which we filled in from part A, we can see that the number of people who do not have a garden is 23. And then the number of people who are female, who also do not have a garden, is 13. So we want the probability that this person is female. So there are 23 people who do not have a garden, and 13 of these 23 people are female. So this means the probability that this person is female is 13 over 23. And this question is worth 2 marks, and we'll get 1 mark for getting the numerator value correct, and the second mark for the denominator value being correct. Ellie makes hats. She makes at least 17 hats per hour. She is paid 46p for each hat she makes. Ray's is a waiter. He works 35 hours and is paid a total of £266. Show that Ellie's hourly rate of pay is more than Ray's hourly rate of pay. So we want to work out what Ellie's minimum hourly rate will be, and then prove that it's more than Ray's hourly rate. So if we start off with Ellie, we've been told that Ellie will make at least 17 hats per hour, and she's paid 46p for each hat she makes. So this means that Ellie will not make any less than 17 hats, meaning she won't earn any less than 46p multiplied by 17. Now the best way to do this question is to convert this 46p into pounds, so that we can compare Ellie's hourly rate to Ray's hourly rate. So 46p is equal to £0.46. So in order to work out Ellie's minimum hourly rate, we need to do the calculation 17 multiplied by 0.46. And if we put this into our calculator, we'll get an answer of £7.82. So next we can move on to Ray's. So Ray's works 35 hours and is paid a total of £266. So in order to work out Ray's hourly rate, we're going to want to do 266 divided by 35 hours. And this will give us an answer of 7 3/5. Now in order to get this into a decimal, we want to press the change button on our calculator. And this will give us an answer of £7.60. So what we've now shown is that Ellie gets paid at least £7.82 per hour and Ray's gets paid £7.60 an hour. So in order to finish this question, we need to write a final conclusion. So we can write something along the lines of £7.82 is greater than £7.60, therefore Ellie's hourly rate is more than Ray's. So this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get 2 marks for using a suitable method to work out their hourly rates of pay, and our final mark for showing the 2 correct values. A and B are odd numbers. Give an example to show that the value of 2 multiplied by A plus B is a multiple of 4. So we've been told that A and B are odd numbers. So what we can do is choose any 2 odd numbers for the values of A and B, and this should give us a multiple of 4. So for this question, we can let A equal 1 and we can let B equal 3. So we can substitute A and B into the expression which we've been given. So this will give us 2 multiplied by 1 plus 3. And we need to remember our BODMAS rules, so we'll always do brackets first and then our multiplication. So this will give us 2 multiplied by 4, which will give us an answer of 8. But in order to prove to the examiner that we know this is true, we can do 8 divided by 4, and this will give us an answer of 2. So this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for choosing 2 odd numbers to substitute into the equation, and we'll get our second mark for arriving to the correct answer, which is a multiple of 4. Show that when A and B are both odd numbers, the value of 2 multiplied by A plus B will always be a multiple of 4. So again we've been told that A and B are both odd numbers, so we can write that an odd number plus an odd number, which is what will be inside these brackets, will always be equal to an even number. Now the final part of this expression is we'll multiply A plus B by 2. So A plus B is even, and any even number multiplied by 2 will always give us a multiple of 4. And we can check this by multiplying some even numbers by 2. So 2 multiplied by 2 is 4, 2 multiplied by 4 will give us 8, 2 multiplied by 6 will give us 12, and so on. So this question is worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for showing that A plus B will always be even, and we'll get our second mark for proving that 2A plus B will always be a multiple of 4. Mr. Page uses oil to heat his home. At the beginning of November there were 1,000 litres of oil in his oil tank. Mr. Page bought enough oil to fill the tank completely. He paid 50p per litre for this oil. He paid a total amount of £750. At the end of February, Mr. Page had 600 litres of oil in the tank. He bought enough oil to fill the tank completely. The cost of oil had increased by 4%. Work out the total amount Mr. Page paid for the oil he bought in February. So the first piece of information we're given is that at the beginning of November, there were 1,000 litres of oil in his tank. Mr. Page then bought enough oil to fill the tank completely. He paid 50p per litre for this oil and paid a total amount of 750. So what this is essentially saying is the amount of money it cost for him to fill his tank completely was £750. So the first thing we can work out is how many litres it took to fill the tank completely. So the first thing we'll want to do is convert this 50p into pounds. So 50 pence is equal to £0.5. So now what we can do is we can work out how many litres it takes to fill the tank completely. And to do this we can do 750 divided by 0.5. And this gives us a value of 1,500 litres. So what we've just worked out is that it takes 1,500 litres to completely fill this tank, given that there's already 1,000 litres of oil in the tank. So what this means is that the total number of litres in this tank is 1,500 plus 1,000, which means the total amount of oil that this tank can hold is 2,500 litres. So now the next thing we're told is that at the end of February, Mr. Page had 600 litres of oil in the tank, and he then bought enough oil to fill the tank completely, and the cost of oil had increased by 4%. So if we want to work out the total amount Mr. Page paid for the oil he bought in February, the first thing we can work out is the cost of the oil in February, given that the cost of oil has increased by 4%. So £0.5 or 50p. In order to work out what this would be after it had been increased by 4%, we're going to want to multiply this value by 1.04. And this gives us an answer of 52 pence, or £0.52. So now the next thing we can work out is how many litres of oil he would have needed to put into his tank to fill the tank completely. So if the tank can hold 2,500 litres, and at the end of February Mr. Page has 600 litres of oil remaining, then the amount of oil he'll need to put in his tank will be 2,500 minus 600 litres. And this gives us an answer of 1,900 litres. So if the cost of oil is 52 pence, and the amount of oil he'll need to put into his tank to fill it completely is 1,900 litres, then the total amount Mr. Page paid for the oil he bought in February will be 1,900 multiplied by 0.52. And this gives us a final answer of £988. Now this question's worth 5 marks. We'll get 1 mark for working out the amount of oil bought in November. We'll get 1 mark for working out the price of oil after the 4% increase. We'll get 1 mark for working out the amount of oil Mr. Page needed to buy in February. We'll get 1 mark for a method to work out the amount Mr. Page spent on oil in February. And we'll get the final mark for the correct answer of £988. Solve 5x minus 6 equals 3 multiplied by x minus 1. So when doing questions like this, the best way to start it off is expanding out this bracket. So we want to multiply this 3 by the x and then by the negative 1. So 3 multiplied by x will be 3x, and then 3 multiplied by negative 1 will give us negative 3. So now in order to solve this equation, we're going to want to get x on one side on its own. So the next thing we can do is we can add 6 to both sides of this equation. And this will give us 5x, and then negative 6 plus 6 will just give us 0. Is equal to 3x minus 3 plus 6. And now negative 3 plus 6 will give us positive 3. Now the next thing we can do is we can minus 3x from both sides of this equation. And this will give us 5x minus 3x is equal to 3. And 5x minus 3x will give us 2x. And this is all equal to 3. Now the final thing we'll need to do to get a value for x will be divide both sides of this equation by 2. So 2 multiplied by x divided by 2 will give us x, and then 3 divided by 2 will give us 3 over 2. So x equals 3 over 2 is our final answer. Now this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get our first mark for expanding out these brackets, our second mark for having the numerical terms on one side of the equation, and then our final mark for the correct answer. Emily buys a pack of 12 bottles of water. The pack costs £5.64. Emily sells all 12 bottles for 50p each. Work out Emily's percentage profit. Give your answer correct to one decimal place. So in order to work out the percentage profit, what we can do is work out how much she spent on each water bottle. So if the pack of water bottles cost £5.64 and there were 12 bottles of water in there, then if we do 5.64 divided by 12, then this will tell us the price of the individual bottles of water. So if we put 5.64 divided by 12 into our calculator, this will give us an answer of 0.47. Now £0.47 is equal to 47p. So if she sells her water bottles for 50p and she bought them for 47p, then this means that her profit on each water bottle was 3 pence. So in order to work out Emily's percentage profit, we can do the amount of profit she made from each water bottle divided by the original cost of the water bottle, which is 3 divided by 47. And this will give us an answer of 0.0638 to 3 significant figures. Now as we can see, this answer is being given in a decimal. So in order to make it a percentage, we're going to want to multiply it by 100. And this will give us a final answer of 6.38%. And now the final thing we need to do for this question is give our answer correct to one decimal place. So 6.38 can be rounded up to 6.4%. Because this 8 is greater than or equal to 5. So our final answer is 6.4%. Now this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get 1 mark for comparing the price of the individual bottles. We'll get a second mark for using a suitable method to work out the percentage profit. And we'll get our third mark for the correct answer to one decimal point. Hasmeet walks once round a circle with diameter 80 metres. There are 8 points equally spaced on the circumference of the circle. Find the distance Hasmeet walks between one point and the next point. So Hasmeet will be walking around the circumference of the circle. So what we're going to want to work out is what the circumference of the circle is. So the circumference of a circle is equal to pi multiplied by the diameter. So in the question we've been told that the circle has a diameter of 80 metres. So what this means is this circle has a circumference of pi multiplied by 80. So 80 pi metres would be the distance that Hasmeet would walk if he walked the full circumference of this circle. However, we want to work out the distance between one point and the next point. So this is just one section out of the 8. So we're going to want to divide our answer by 8 to work out the length of one section, and this gives us an answer of 10 pi. Now we can leave our answer as 10 pi, or we can rewrite it as a decimal by pressing the change button on our calculator. and this will give us an answer of 31.42 to 2 decimal places. And this will be our final answer. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for working out the circumference of the full circle, and the second mark for the correct answer. 4 of the points are moved as shown in the diagram below. Hasmeet walks once round the circle again. Has the mean distance that Hasmeet walks between one point and the next point changed? You must give a reason for your answer. So we want to know if the mean distance that Hasmeet has walked between one point and the next point has changed. So we worked out in part A that the circumference of this circle will be 80 pi metres. Now when working out the mean, we add together each of these individual distances and then divide it by the number of lengths that there are. So if we were to add together each of these distances, we'd still get an answer of 80 pi, despite the fact that 4 of the points have moved. And there are still 8 points on this circle, meaning we'd still be dividing 80 pi by 8, meaning that the mean will still remain the same. So no, the mean distance that Hasmeet walks between one point and the next point will not have changed because the number of points and the circumference of the circle has stayed the same. There are only blue cubes, yellow cubes and green cubes in a bag. There are twice as many blue cubes as yellow cubes and 4 times as many green cubes as blue cubes. Hannah takes at random a cube from the bag. Work out the probability that Hannah takes a yellow cube. So there's a few different ways we can do this question, but one of the ways is by forming a ratio from this piece of information. So the first thing the question's told us is there are twice as many blue cubes as yellow cubes. Now if we were to put this into a ratio, what this means is the ratio of blue cubes to yellow cubes will be 2 to 1. Now what this means is for every yellow cube, there will be 2 blue cubes, meaning there are twice as many blue cubes as yellow cubes. Now we can do the same thing for the green and blue cubes. So we've been told there are 4 times as many green cubes as blue cubes. So what this means is the ratio of green cubes to blue cubes will be 4 to 1. So as before, what this means is for every blue cube, there will be 4 green cubes, and therefore 4 times as many green cubes as blue cubes. So now what we're going to want to do is combine these 2 ratios here. Now both these ratios have the blue cubes included in them. However, in order to combine these ratios, we're going to want this number to be the same. So to do this, we can multiply this ratio by 2. Now what this means is for every 8 green cubes, there will be 2 blue cubes. So these 2 ratios are still equivalent, but we can now combine these ratios. So the ratio of green to blue to yellow cubes will now be 8 to 2 to 1. Now we want to work out the probability that Hannah will take a yellow cube. So to help us solve this question, we can make these values the number of cubes in this bag. So what this means is that there will be 8 green cubes in the bag, 2 blue cubes in the bag, 1 yellow cube in the bag, and therefore 11 cubes in the bag in total. So if there's 1 yellow cube in the bag out of a total of 11 cubes, then the probability that Hannah will take out a yellow cube will be 1 over 11. And this will be our final answer. Now this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get our first mark for forming these 2 ratios at the start, our second mark for combining these 2 ratios, and our third mark for the correct answer. Rotate trapezium T 180 degrees about the origin. Label the new trapezium A. So the easiest way to do this in an exam is by using tracing paper. So what you would do is place your tracing paper in this area here. Using a pencil, draw over the trapezium T. And you can also draw an arrow so you can see how many degrees you've rotated the paper. And then you're going to want to place your pencil on the origin and then rotate your tracing paper 180 degrees. And after this rotation, your arrow which you have drawn should be pointing downwards. Now after your 180 degree rotation, you should have a trapezium in this top left quadrant here, and it should look something like this. And we've been told to label the new trapezium A. Translate trapezium T by the vector -1, -3. Label the new trapezium B. So with vectors, the top number is our x-axis, and then the bottom number is our y-axis. So if we want to translate this trapezium by this vector, we're going to want to move all of the coordinates to the left by 1 point, and then down by 3 points. So you can either do this in one go, or do it in 2 separate parts. So if we start off with the first point, this is point 2, -1. So first we'll minus 1 from the x-coordinate, which will give us 1, and then minus 3 from the y-coordinate, which will give us -4. And we can draw across here. Next, the coordinate 4, -1. So again we'll minus 1 from the x-coordinate and minus 3 from the y-coordinate, and this will give us the coordinate 3, -4. Next, 5 and -2. So minus 1 from the x-axis and then minus 3 from the y-axis, and this will give us 4, -5. And as you can see, we're starting to form a trapezium shape. So our final point is 2, -2. So again, minus 1 from the x-axis and minus 3 from the y-axis, and this should give us an answer of 1, -5. And now the final thing to do to complete this question is join the crosses which we've drawn. And this is trapezium B. Now this question is worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for correctly drawing trapezium A, and our second mark for correctly drawing trapezium B. P to the power of 3 multiplied by P to the power of x equals P to the power of 9. Find the value of x. So for this question we need to know the algebraic principle that something to the power of x multiplied by the same thing to the power of y will be equal to that number to the power of x plus y. So we can apply this principle to this question. So if we use this rule, this means that P to the power of 3 multiplied by P to the power of x will give us an answer of P to the power of 3 plus x. So if P to the power of 3 multiplied by P to the power of x equals P to the power of 3 plus x, then this means that P to the power of 3 plus x is equal to P to the power of 9. So we can simplify this down to 3 plus x is equal to 9. And then if we minus 3 from both sides, we get an answer of x equals 6. 7 squared to the power of y equals 7 to the power of 10. Find the value of y. So for this question we need to know the algebraic principle that a to the power of x to the power of y is equal to a to the power of x multiplied by y. So again we can apply this rule to this question. So if this is the case, then this means that 7 squared to the power of y will be equal to 7 to the power of 2y. So if 7 squared to the power of y is equal to 7 to the power of 2y, then this means that 7 to the power of 10 is equal to 7 to the power of 2y. And we can simplify this down to 10 is equal to 2y, and this tells us that y is equal to 5. (100 to the power of a multiplied by 1000 to the power of b can be written in the form 10 to the power of w. show that w equals 2a plus 3b. So if 100 to the power of a multiplied by 1000 to the power of b can be written in the form 10 to the power of w, then this means that 100a multiplied by 1000b equals 10 to the power of w. So now what we need to do is solve this equation. And the way to do this is to write 100 and 1000 as 10 to the power of something. So if we start off with 100, so 100 is equal to 10 squared, so we can rewrite 100a as 10 squared all to the power of a. Next 1000 to the power of b. So 1000 can be rewritten as 10 cubed, and this will all be to the power of b. So now 10 squared to the power of a, because the 10 squared is in the brackets, we'll multiply the powers together. So this will give us 10 to the power of 2a, and then 10 cubed to the power of b will give us 10 to the power of 3b, and this is all equal to 10 to the power of w. Now what we can do is multiply these two numbers together, and 10 to the power of 2a multiplied by 10 to the power of 3b will give us 10 to the power of 2a plus 3b. So therefore 10 to the power of w equals 10 to the power of 2a plus 3b. And what this means is that 2a plus 3b is equal to w. Now this question's worth 2 marks. So we'll get our first mark for rewriting 100a multiplied by 1000b as 10 squared to the power of a multiplied by 10 cubed to the power of b. And we'll get our second mark for showing that w equals 2a plus 3b with the correct reasoning. ABCD is a trapezium. Work out the size of angle CDA. Give your answer correct to 1 decimal place. So the first thing we can do is mark angle CDA onto our diagram so that we know which angle we're working out. So angle CDA is this angle here. So the first thing we can do to make this question easier to solve is by adding a line here. And this gives us a triangle on the right hand side of this trapezium, making this angle a right angle. So the first thing we can start working on is this right angled triangle here. So the first thing we can do is work out the length of the base. And to do this we can use Pythagoras. So Pythagoras' theorem is that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And c squared is always the hypotenuse, which is the longest length. So we can see from this diagram that the line AB will be the hypotenuse of this triangle. So because of this we can rearrange this equation. So we can rearrange it to a squared is equal to c squared minus b squared. And we can start substituting in numbers. So our value for c will be 7.5 centimetres. And then our value for b will be 6 centimetres. And if we put this into our calculator, this tells us that a squared is equal to 20.25. So the final thing we need to do to work out this length is square root both sides of the equation. And this tells us that a is equal to 4.5. So therefore the base of this triangle is 4.5 centimetres. Now next we can move on to this rectangle which we've drawn on the diagram. So opposite lengths in a rectangle are equal in length. Already on the diagram, it tells us that the length of this rectangle is 10 centimetres and the height of this rectangle is 6 centimetres. So what this means is the base of the rectangle will also be 10 centimetres and this length on the right will also be 6 centimetres. So on the diagram we've also been told that the full length of the trapezium is 24 centimetres. So what this means is the base of this right angled triangle on the right hand side of the trapezium will be equal to 24 minus 10 minus 4.5, which is the lengths we worked out for the base of the rectangle and the base of this right angled triangle on the left. And this gives us an answer of 9.5 centimetres. So we can fill this in on our diagram. So now what we can see on this triangle on the right, we have two lengths, which means we can work out one of the angles by using trigonometry. So we want to work out the angle of CDA. So we can label up these sides. So the hypotenuse is always the longest side. And then the side which is opposite to this angle will be this side here. So we can label this the opposite side. And then the adjacent side is the base of this triangle. So the formula we'll want to use is tan x is equal to the opposite over adjacent. So if we substitute the values we've got in our triangle into this equation, it tells us that tan x is equal to 6 divided by 9.5. And what this means is that x is equal to tan to the negative 1 multiplied by 6 over 9.5. And if we put this into our calculator, this tells us that x is equal to 32.2756 and so on. Now this question wants us to give our answer correct to one decimal place. So 32.2756 to one decimal place gives us a value of x, which is 32.3 degrees. And this is our final answer. Now this question's worth 5 marks. We'll get our first 2 marks for correctly using Pythagoras' theorem to work out the length of the triangle on the left. We'll get our 3rd mark for correctly working out the length of the triangle on the right. We'll get our 4th mark for using trigonometry to work out the angle of CDA. And our final mark for correctly working out the angle. Use your calculator to work out the square root of sin 25 plus sin 40 divided by cos 25 minus cos 40. Write down all the figures on your calculator display. So we can put this into our calculator all in one go. And to do this, we first need to press the square root button, and then we want to press the fraction button, which should look something like this. So we want to type in sin 25 plus sin 40. And then if we press the down arrow key, this will take us to the denominator of the fraction. And we can type in cos 25 minus cos 40. And then we press the equals button. And we want to write down all of the figures on our calculator display. And this is 2.75603957. And this question's worth 2 marks. And both of these will be for the correct answer and for writing all the figures on your calculator display. Write your answer to part A correct to 2 decimal places. So our answer to part A is 2.75603957. Now 2 decimal places is between this 5 and 6. However, because 6 is greater than 5, we'll round this 5 up to a 6, which will give us an answer of 2.76. And this question's worth 1 mark, and this is for the correct answer. Solve 2x squared equals 72. So in order to solve this equation, we're going to want to get x on its own on one side of this equation. So the first thing we can do is we can divide both sides by 2. Now 2x squared divided by 2 will give us x squared, and then 72 divided by 2 will give us 36. Now the final thing we'll want to do is we'll want to square root both sides of this equation, and then on the left side of this equation we'll just be left with an x. So the square root of x squared will give us x, and then the square root of 36 will give us plus or minus 6. Now this plus or minus is easy to forget, however it's important for this question because it's worth 1 mark in the answer. So our final answer is plus or minus 6, and we'll get 1 mark for the plus or minus, and we'll get 1 mark for the 6. Expand and simplify 2x plus 1 multiplied by 3x minus 2. So in order to do this question, it can sometimes be helpful to draw arrows. So these arrows show which terms we need to multiply together. So we can first start off with 2x multiplied by 3x. So 2 multiplied by 3 is 6, and then x multiplied by x will give us x squared. 2x multiplied by negative 2 will give us negative 4x. Positive 1 multiplied by 3x will give us plus 3x. And then positive 1 multiplied by negative 2 will give us negative 2. So now the final thing we need to do is simplify down this expression. And the terms we'll need to simplify are these 2x terms in the middle. So negative 4x plus 3x will give us negative x. And this is our final answer. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get 1 mark for the original expansion and the second mark for the correct answer. Factorise x squared plus 6x plus 9. So when factorising quadratics, we want to find two numbers which will multiply together to make the constant, which is this numerical term on the end, and then two numbers which will add together to make the x coefficient, which is this 6 here. So we'll want two numbers which will multiply to make 9 and add to make 6. So we can start by listing numbers which will multiply together to make 9. So we have 1 multiplied by 9, 2 is not a factor of 9, and then we have 3 multiplied by 3. Now 1 plus 9 is not equal to 6. However, 3 plus 3 is equal to 6. Therefore, x plus 3 is a factor of this quadratic. So what this means is that x squared plus 6x plus 9 is equal to x plus 3 multiplied by x plus 3. And we can simplify this down to x plus 3 squared. And this question's worth 1 mark, and this is for the correct answer.